Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody. How are you doing this evening? Chris Jordan here, coming at you live from Austin, Texas. Hope everybody has had a great week so far. Happy World UFO Day, everybody. You gotta love the fact that there is a day around the world actively dedicated to UFOs, UAPs. And say what you want, everybody. I am a fan of the term UAP. I think it has actively brought science into the world of this investigation unashamedly and unabashedly now. So that's where I stand on it. Our guests tonight, in the first segment, we will be talking with Dr. Simeon Hein. He is the author of such books as Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Forms. He is also the founder of the Institute for Resonance. He also has the website Black Swan Ghosts, as well as the book Black Swan Ghosts. We'll talk about some Black Swan event concepts tonight. Specifically tonight, we will be talking about Dr. Simeon's work into the world of crop circles. So welcome to the show, Dr. Simeon Hein. Are you there on the line?
Yeah, hi Chris. How's it going?
There he is. Hey, doing fantastic. How are you?
Good. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Let's get in real quick. How did you first come to the world of studying things, specifically studying things like crop circles, because that is a very drilled in and specified area of study?
Chris, do I have your show on here? Is that what's going on? I am just getting a lot of, sorry, it's my fault.
That's okay.
Getting you on the YouTube live.
No worries, no worries.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. How did I get into the area of crop circles? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
It's a very good question. It came through a remote viewing, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with. I took a class back in the 90s at the Farsight Institute, and one of the targets that we got towards the end of the week, it was an 8-day class, this ability we have to perceive non-local information with a good degree of accuracy, sometimes very good accuracy. Yeah, so I just got curious. I had never, I had just a couple of years out of grad school. I had been an assistant professor teaching statistics. I didn't know what a crop circle was. Remote viewing at the time for me was a stretch enough. And to see one of these pictures, I got curious. You want your feedback when you do remote viewing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get some feedback. What was this? This was the triple Julia set from Windmill Hill. That's what the target was. So, you do the session blind, then you see the picture at the end. I was curious what these were, Chris. So I went with a guy named Ron Russell from the Denver area on a crop circle tour. I had met him at a UFO conference in the Denver area. I mean, I got curious about UFOs too after taking remote viewing. And he said, I give these tours, we can walk around in them, go over to the UK, see what happens. So I thought this would be a good way to get feedback on my session, which had a lot of strange aspects to it in terms of the energy, the feeling of the target. It was different than you would get from like the Eiffel Tower or Washington Monument. It was a different type of energy.
Sure.
That's what you get in remote viewing. So I went with Ron, and I immediately encountered people that told me they were getting weird phenomena in and around these crop circles. We didn't have any idea how they were made back then. But, talking to people who were there once we got there, there were really odd things happening in people's cameras and batteries, not to mention seeing orbs ball lightning things around crop circles, and even an occasional UFO. So I could see for myself that the people, even though I was new to the subject, the people around the phenomena were very enthusiastic about it. So yes, I wrote that book. I went there, researched it, and it became Opening Minds, which is about resonance in crop circles and remote viewing. The thing that really, I guess, sucked me into the topic was seeing our own cameras and batteries fail in and around crop circles. Even the case at the Danebury Triad formation near Andover. The first couple weeks I was there, first week or so, was seeing Ron's camcorder have actually a malfunction that led it to melt on the inside.
Oh, wow.
By the power supply. While it was not filming, just sitting in the crop, it melted. And I thought, there's got to be something going on here with these patterns and energy. So that's how I got involved with it, is seeing evidence for myself that there was something about the space around crop circles that affected electronics and created orbs and space-time distortions, just sort of odd phenomena that we see around paranormal places, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And that's how I got involved.
Wow. And it's remarkable that you got involved with that through remote viewing. That is where that study led you. I know, and yes, my audience is very familiar with the fact of the concept of a remote viewing. We've had Lynn Buchanan on a few times. I normally go and cover the remote viewing conference every year. I myself take remote viewing classes with Lynn Buchanan. And it's pretty remarkable. And I know last time we had you on, we talked a little bit about the idea of quantum entanglement and how that really lays a great foundation for actual quantifiable proof, other than statistical proof that's out there in hit and miss catalogs, things like that. And with databases, a lot of people don't understand that there are, with traditional remote viewing, numerous protocols involved, including having a monitor. Like you were saying, getting your feedback on a session is very important from a monitor, things like that.
That's right. It's very important to get your feedback, and there are other quantum principles beyond entanglement that come into play here. One of them is called the Ron-Bohm effect, where you can have zero electromagnetic field radiating from an object or an area, but you're still going to get communication at a distance, kind of like what remote viewing is.
Interesting.
And this was discovered in the 50s and verified in 86 in Japan. And it's basically the way a particle can become correlated with another group of particles with zero electromagnetic interaction, only through this phantom property of what's called vector potential. It's just pure numbers that make quantum mechanics work. And if those numbers say that there's interaction going on, you will get this communication going on. And it turns out that Hal Puthoff, who ran the RV program at SRI for the government with Russ Targ, when he left the program, when he left the RV program and turned it over to Ed May, I believe in the late 80s, he went on to get patents in the Ron-Bohm effect for communication, which I think indicates to us that there's something for someone who's spent more than a decade studying remote viewing to come out of it and go straight into an application of the Ron-Bohm effect. I think shows us something that's going on there. But so it's not literally entanglement in my view. It's not the particles, because entangled particles in theory don't exchange information. It's sort of like a statistical correlation, but the Ron-Bohm effect does. So
Interesting.
I'm leaning more towards the AB effect and the types of things associated with the AB effect. There are things called fractal magnetic toroidal moments, other
Oh,
types of electromagnetic configurations that are not typical, that are not direct, but lead to non-local distant interaction.
interesting. Now, especially whenever you're talking toroidal fields, things like that, that's specifically some of the things that have been hypothesized for years as possible sources of crop circles.
Well, there's a lot of overlap here, Chris. I mean, I think we need to accept at the end of the day all the phenomena that a lot of us have been interested in over the years. Um, you cannot escape the commonalities between the types of symptoms you see around these phenomena that we call paranormal or psychic or psi related.
Yeah.
Um, and the donut shaped magnetic moments, in contrast to these ordinary 90-degree electrical magnetic configurations that Maxwell uh, explored and showed us in Maxwell's equations, which are just standard, ordinary electromagnetic interactions. When you begin to push those relationships between electricity and magnetism beyond a certain angle, you end up with other forms of electromagnetic phenomena, some of which don't radiate anymore in any conventional way, but still create long distance interactions and create something called magnetic monopoles and exotic materials that even create magnetization of non-magnetic materials. You're in a whole different realm.
Yeah.
They don't call it paranormal in physics, but that's what we ended up calling it for those of us who've experienced it or who study these topics.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can escape the conclusion that this is all the same thing. We're talking about another type of electromagnetic space that's in the same space you and I are in right now. And it's working differently than our computer and electrical technology, which is based on Maxwell's equations and 90-degree angles and all that ordinary stuff. It's predictable and it works, and we're able to communicate right now like we are and communicate out to our audience and so forth. This is a whole another range of phenomena with inverse properties like negative temperatures and the ability to cool an environment when they rev up. The opposite of our electronics, which tends to heat things, right?
Yeah.
It's all the exact opposite. And to have this non-local distant interaction,
well, even
the ability to cloak, to become invisible, to form orbs and ball lightning, micro ball lightning. This is what you see across all these phenomena, whether it's crop circles, Bigfoot, or UFOs. And I think it's maybe our modern professional egos that just want these topics to be separate, because the conferences are, they're about Bigfoot or they're about UFOs, crop circles. But why do you get the same phenomena happening in all of these phenomena unless there's some fundamental underlying reasons, which I think are these exotic quantum principles that have not been explored very much? And, you listen to people talk about being around where a Bigfoot was, and they say that it was their hair stood on end like it was static charge. Just in the area where the Bigfoot had been standing. And then they feel a little nauseous or weird, and they're trying to understand why. It's because the physical space had its properties changed by being around such a life form. In the same way that the crop circle, regardless of who made it, whether you and I went out and made it, in my view, or a UFO left it with propulsion system, something about that shape is Bill Tiller, who spoke at the urban conferences a number of times, called it a conditioned space. It has a different resonance than ordinary space. And it operates kind of in an inverse way, but we can see these symptoms over and over again. Then you get the orbs. Then you notice your batteries are draining. It's always the same thing every time. You even read UFO reports from NICAP from the 60s and 70s, strange effects around UFOs. Same thing, people said their radio went on the fritz. car engine stopped working.
Yeah.
I interviewed a lot of Bigfoot witnesses. They said their car stalled right around the Bigfoot. I mean, I don't think it's a separate phenomenon. There's too many similar things going on. What we're dealing with is another type of space. Call it a parallel reality, but it overlaps with ours. And we call it paranormal because we can't totally go where it is. We just see some of the overlap. That's my view of it, Chris.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, quite literally, this is a regular topic of conversation on the show, Simeon, is the idea that vibration, specifically the range in which our eyes can see, that very locked in range, there's a whole world slightly adjacent to us, that is gamma waves, all kinds of things. Like, you know, you have to have almost imperceptible detectors to detect them. However, much like an analog watch is changed whenever you get it near a magnet, somehow or another people are changed. And I've held for a long time, and whenever I've spoken at conferences, I hold the fact that people, specifically people who have been in close contact with UFO, UAP, people who have been taken aboard craft, you are in something that is able to warp space and time and vibrate between vibrational fields. Like, I've played with some Tesla power and stuff in my home studio. My wife made me stop when my radio clock started looking like the Predator language. But I got to a point where copper was magnetic. And that's some pretty high order RF field. You know, like when you're talking about people like Hutchison, who was able to make metals basically become liquid, things like that, achieve levitation of pretty heavy objects in his home garage. You know, and this was decades ago.
Yes.
So but like you said, that changes that atmosphere. It's no different than turning on a Tesla coil for 10 minutes and then walking in the room. It smells like ozone. It changes the atmosphere around it. The whole field does.
Right. That's right. I was just at a conference a couple of weekends ago called the Cosmic Summit in Greensboro, North Carolina, organized by Randall Carson, the kind of historian, archaeologist who looks at ancient societies, what sort of technology they had. And Bob Greener from the Martin Fleischer Memorial Project was presenting there, and he brought along these Tesla metal samples, so I could actually hold them. Everyone could pass them around and look at them. You know, these twisted metal samples that look like they've been liquefied, but it was done at room temperature, just with electricity.
Yeah.
And not enough electricity to like totally destroy something. It's just going in and creating some sort of coherency in the atomic structure where there is this sort of the ordinary bonds that create and maintain the elements, chemical elements we know about, they change into something else very briefly, and in that moment they completely release their ordinary electron configurations and melt at room temperature. This is sort of one of the phenomena we see happening in these contexts, is materials liquefying at room temperature. And that is very powerful.
Nope. Sorry, you're breaking up.
About it, because you haven't seen Hutchinson samples. Been in there, weapons has happened. We think of melting temperature.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me just.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, if you just want to, if you want to keep that mute right there on. Oops. Oh no! Are you calling me? You still there, Doctor?
Yeah, I'm here. I just muted the
yes,
camera.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll maintain the best audio for us, most definitely. And like you were saying,
so
go ahead.
Yeah, I have seen materials melt in front of my eyes at a demonstration in Japan. This fellow that could do this near Nagasaki when I was teaching remote viewing in Japan. One of my students, who was a brain surgeon, took me to see this guy who could do PK. What we're talking about, Chris, is something called PK.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and it's the ability to influence materials that you would normally think would require huge amounts of energy, but certain humans that have this training, Nina Kalikina in Soviet Union was able to do this, and there are videos of her on YouTube doing this in front of lots of scientists back in Soviet Union was around. They project this coherent energy that literally takes matter apart. It strips it apart and then lets it reassemble. I saw this with my eyes in Japan. This guy could twist Coke bottles into spirals in front of your eyes. Ordinary glass Coke bottle. Like they would temporarily become a liquid. And it wasn't hot when he was done. We could touch it. It wasn't heated. It wasn't doing it through heat. It was doing it through some sort of coherent energy transfer that changes the structure of the atoms so that they're not bound into their charge configurations like they normally are. And I think that's part of the secret here, Chris, is what holds everything together as we know it are charges. And if you neutralize those charges even for a millisecond, the atoms don't know where they are anymore. They're not oriented the way they were across these huge metal lattices at a subatomic level. And they instantly change. And I think this is why we don't know very much about this. It has a lot of military applications. You're talking about melting materials with very low amounts of energy. Yeah. And I can't, that has national security implications, which in my opinion, I don't prove. I think this is why we haven't heard very much about this, because everyone who's gone in this direction has had their programs, their experiments sucked into black budget operations because it has a lot of implications. But it's a real
I mean it
metal also. He bent spoons. He could levitate objects just like Hutchins. He could levitate it over his palm. He didn't need any electrical source. His body was the source. This is what we're talking about in terms of the fundamentals of what we call paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, even right now, the great Hal Puthoff is right down the road here in Austin, Texas, in his lab working on pulling energy from vacuums. Doing all kinds of wild science like that. And it's interesting to see where these things lead. What did you learn through your study of crop circles? What did you learn as far as frequency and resonance and their connection to the world around us, Doctor?
Well, what it seemed like to me, Chris, is that if you had the proper shape of a crop circle, and not just ones made by plasmas or ball lightning or UFOs, those are some of the sources in the past of crop circles, but even human-made ones. If you got the mathematical ratios correct, the spiral shape of the way the wheat is sort of spiraling around the center of the crop circle.
Sure.
It seemed that if you got it very precisely constructed, it would be electronically active for a period of time, maybe a couple days. And that it would literally affect cameras and watches and batteries and even create occasional space-time distortions. People going in these circles feeling like they all of a sudden were thrust back into the past, another time period, encountering people speaking a different type of English and from the past, wearing different clothing.
And this is in both anomalous crop circles as well as known made crop circles, like crop circles that we knew were made by human hands.
Right.
Interesting.
And we made a bunch of our own ones. See,
sure.
We initially didn't think people could make these really big ones, and there were people that came to the conferences that were circle makers, that were just curious about the state of knowledge of crop circles. And they saw Ron and myself, and they thought we were approachable. And they offered to show us how they made theirs, first in the daytime and then at night. The ones in the daytime were for like advertisements and things, but the ones at night, they would just pick a field that they felt had good feng shui or something and go place, very carefully place a pattern. And they convinced me that humans with practice could make really good big ones.
Yeah.
But the surprising thing was that they had electrical activity that we could measure with our static meter, and that would affect our equipment and so forth.
No.
And so I didn't believe this, but they showed me that human-made ones could be electrically active.
That is very interesting, because one of the things I bring up regularly is, especially when it comes to paranormal investigation, things like that, and preparing for paranormal investigation, is when you're preparing your equipment, that you should try to be as blank slate as possible. You know, don't think about the location you're going to, rumors you've heard about it, stories you've heard about it. Don't watch any documentaries about it, you know, things like that, because you may actively be charging the environment itself with your intent.
Right. And that's a good point.
You know, like this, very much the same way, like these guys put so much effort and passion into the creation of what is basically a sacred geometry. And like you said, if they get the angles of that sacred geometry right with their intent, it basically rings the bell.
Right. They're definitely creating an interaction with those shapes. In material science, it's called helicity, which means that there's a directionality. The way the wheat stalks are spiraling left or right.
Yeah.
And there's a top concept called anisotropy, which again is that everything is facing the same direction. I mean, it gives liquid crystals their ability to create all the cool things that liquid crystals do, like our computer screens and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's because they're all lined up one way or another, and they reveal colors behind on the screen, or however the particular screen you have works. It has to do with these crystals all changing directions like little soldiers in precise ways at the exact right time to create these sort of fixed images or moving images on our screen with the right colors and the right contrast and so forth. And it seemed to me that what you had in the fields were like liquid crystals made of wheat, because you had that precise directionality and the precise ratio. And some of the ones that seemed more active to me seemed like fractal shapes, self-similar fractal shapes, circles within circles.
Sure.
More circular formations than square ones had that activity to them. And the biggest surprise to me was when I started looking into cryptids and Bigfoot, to see that people were experiencing the same phenomena around Bigfoot and cryptids with their cameras and watches and devices that we had seen around the crop circles. I mean, what could be a bigger stretch than saying there's a Bigfoot crop circle connection? But there is. There is.
What's interesting is that there have been numerous cases over the last probably 5 years to decade, Doctor, where these worlds of paranormal investigation are beginning to cross paths, where the fields of evidence out there, I won't say proof, but I will say evidence. I will say that it's, laboratory evidence, things that we can bring forward, that there is a growing body of that there to show that there is connection between these phenomena.
There is. And the reason we don't know more about this is because there's tremendous stigma around these topics when people experience it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's easy to not talk about it or forget about it if it just doesn't fit in the mainstream social consensus view of reality that we're taught. So on one hand, people are afraid, and I'm speaking as a sociologist here, they're afraid of the ostracism and the ridicule and the hostility of being a UFO or Bigfoot experiencer. And it's just easier to forget about it or never talk about it again than to say, hey, I saw something that's really strange and doesn't fit. And then you got to throw in decades of government disinformation campaigns.
Yeah.
Creating their own ridicule and stigma around the topics for whatever reasons the government wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And you sort of have this double whammy on either side for witnesses. But the evidence that this is true, you just have to look like someone like Stan Gordon, the researcher from Pennsylvania. You know, I've talked to him a couple of times. I've read his book, Silent Invasion, Creepy Cryptids, and the Silent Invasion is about the Bigfoot UFO connection.
Yep.
He wasn't looking for Bigfoot. He was a UFO. And he answered the phone for the Westinghouse informal UFO club that met after work that Stan Friedman was a part of in Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
And he was the phone boy. He answered the phone starting in 1959. He's been researching this longer than any of us have been alive. 59. And he said he was looking for UFO reports, and people started reporting Bigfoot in the same areas where the UFOs were seen, starting in 1965, 2 years before the Patterson-Gimlin film. The famous film of Patty walking across at Bluff Creek. And so this is someone that's just a really good example of how these phenomena cross, who wasn't looking for it, right?
Yeah.
Why would you get Sasquatch and Bigfoot in the same field as a UFO? Around the same times or in the same general vicinities, and other creepy cryptids. Some of them are kind of creepy. Just saying that kind of lightly, but we don't understand exactly what they are. Yeah. Except that they're living bipedal creatures. It's hard to say what they are. You know, you wouldn't get them happening around UFOs unless, again, there's some fundamental underlying principles that involve both of these phenomena. In other words, it suggests to me, Chris, that UFOs are not just spaceships from other planets with little guys in them coming here to test the plans or do some experiments or something, or abduct people or whatever they're doing. There's something more to it going on. It's almost like a veil is being lifted and we're seeing another stage with its own cast of characters. And those characters come in groups. They're not inseparable. They're not separable. They come together because they're part of the same frequency, like you used that word. They're part of that same general canvas. Yeah. They could appear to be extraterrestrial. Maybe some of them are. But, you know, you have to really come up with a good reason why you would get. Often people have UFO experiences and then they get strange experiences around their homes. Yep. For a while. Yeah, and it's not just that there's a hitchhiker thing following them back from the UFO field, or there's something more to it than that.
Well, and that's where, like I was saying earlier, that concept of the watch and the magnet, that person themselves is now vibrating at a different frequency. You know, which to me explains at least somewhat, you know, phenomenologically how these experiencers of these events end up having other experiences, you know, end up becoming sometimes a magnet for experience. Right. And some people even come back, you know, as fully changed people. Some people come back with wounds being healed, right, illnesses being healed. Yes, some of them come back able to help other people. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting, and you're just mentioning a whole topic in and of itself that's fascinating. Is these spontaneous healings around UFOs and Sasquatch and other phenomena. And people who felt they were healed. Crop circles. There were cases of people feeling that they were healed. Yeah. And cases of people having their cars repaired overnight in areas where Sasquatch were seen on the front lawn, and they had some bad accident, and the next morning it's completely fixed up. I mean, recently, you know, not 100%, but pretty good. Like how it makes you think of these people that can do PK, like maybe these Sasquatch have some PK ability that they use rarely, and if they really like a certain person, they'll see something's off and they'll fix it, you know? They'll just do their best to fix it with their energy systems.
their natural biological system. I mean, this is what the evidence suggests. I know it seems hard to believe, but this is what people say they experience. I had a friend, Julie from Alabama, that had one of these experiences. She had a Sasquatch sighting as a 10-year-old in Indiana, Marion, Indiana. And she saw one of these Sasquatch at the end of the street picking berries. It was white-haired.
Wow.
And then she had a UFO experience over the Marion, supermarket, saw something hovering there. A number of people did. And years later, she was in need of a pipe wrench in Alabama, and she's deep in the woods, far away from everything. And there's flooding going on, inside her house. She goes outside just to compose herself, to take a couple breaths, and there's the perfect pipe wrench sitting in the driveway, the exact thing she would need at the exact moment. It sounds like a fairy tale, but
Wow.
It happened. And it's happened to many people around the Sasquatch phenomena. It's like they're either listening in or they have another, like the way remote viewers can go in and remote view a distant location and see it from a bird's eye view and get a feeling what's going on there. It's like the Sasquatch can do that with certain people, for better or for worse, through resonance,
Yeah.
And they're able to take action that is beneficial to you. Not to mention healings. There are cases of them healing people too, just like that. I know these aren't really common. They're kind of rare events, but they happen. And it demands that we come up with some bigger scientific paradigm than the one we've been dealing with, which isn't really doing a particularly great job anyway. I think it's time we moved on to a larger scientific paradigm. I suggested recently on Twitter X that every university should have a department of paranormal sciences.
Absolutely.
Why not? You have all these, you got the data, you got the cases, it repeats over and over again, rare, but it's the same thing over and over again, decade in, decade out. What are the commonalities here? What does this tell us about physics?
Yeah.
I think it has something to do with what we call coherent matter, which is like lasers and Bose-Einstein condensates and masers. Before lasers, there were microwave, amplitude stimulated emission. It was a similar thing with microwaves you get with lasers. But we all know what lasers look like. They have that incredible intensity, but if you're looking from the side, unless there's a lot of dust, you don't see them.
Yeah.
These phenomena seem to be laser focused like that, which suggests that there's some coherency going on between the atoms, between the matter itself is correlated. And it's able to do what seems like magic. It really seems like magic, but it happens. And it happens around UFO sightings. It can go the other way too. It can create really strange effects. But as you pointed out, it changes people's lives. And sometimes after experiencing orbs or these phenomena like orbs, ball lightning, they become a different person. The Day family, I mentioned this in Dark Matter Monsters, and Andrew Collins wrote about this in his book, The New Circle Makers. The Day family encountering this blue mist on the road outside of the London suburbs area, and they had missing time. They saw these orbs, they encountered beings, and then they all changed over the next couple of weeks. They became interested in the environment. They quit smoking. They became different people. So it's fascinating.
And it's even more fascinating whenever you start getting into the messages that experiencers get, the overwhelming feelings that they get that are very similar between experiences. The messages that abductees receive seem to be very familiar. The messages from NDE, near-death experiencers. It's pretty remarkable when you start, and this is what I've said about AI the whole time, is that fields like this, fields of data like this, like being able to take all of the Bigfoot research organization sightings and feed them into an AI, we would be able to cull data so fast.
It's a good point.
Yeah, because there's and I know for a lot of people in my audience out there, AI seems very scary, But there's some great stuff out there. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Psi Summary, Doctor, but it's one that I absolutely love, where it's made specifically for researchers. The only data pool it draws from is the data pool that you give it. So you quite literally take research papers of the topic that you're looking at, you feed it into it, and then you ask it to give you a summary of 1,000 words, 1,500 words with 8 bullet points. You know, so it basically summarizes scientific research for you.
I like it.
Oh, it's incredible. It's great. It's fantastic. And when you're talking about things
that's
like,
good because it doesn't have the bias.
exactly, it's not pulling trash off of Google that may or may not be fact checked.
Right. I mean, you're just reminding me of when I used to have advertising campaigns on Facebook and Google, and they both eventually wrote me and said, "This isn't real. We're canceling your account.
Yeah,
we're canceling your business account, not personal, but
you
can no longer advertise with us, period, because we don't believe in remote viewing." It's like, I wrote back to Facebook, "I will come out and give you a lecture on the history of remote viewing, the special access program, and all the success that the government RV program had." Never, no response. So it's like a type of dogmatism, corporate dogmatism, and well, it'll change eventually, but that would be very helpful, because there's this bias against these subjects because
there are.
Well, whatever reason it is, it's pretty bad, and it's limited us. It's inhibited our evolution as a society.
Well, and I think
we can see where it's leading. We can see where it's leading if we don't change.
It definitely, as you were saying a minute ago, I am in full agreement with you that we need a new paradigm in science. We need a new way specifically for good citizen scientists to be able to shake the hands of science with their data. I mean, quite literally, I just released the field observation and encounter log. It's
nice.
It's like 100-page little book that you can carry in your pocket, because unfortunately, all too often, if somebody does have a picture, they didn't sit down and write down that experience when it happened. You know, so and that's just it. Like, we can bring a scientist in a lab a picture all day long, but what they need is the 1,000 words with the picture. They need where it was taken, a geolocation, what direction it was taken in, what the temperature was outside.
No, it's exactly.
You know, and
we need to record all this.
Yeah,
we need to record all
this.
We're not.
Even in the paranormal field, whenever people are out doing paranormal investigations, are you writing all of this data down when you take a picture or when you gather an EVP recording? Because it's all very important. You know, like, even as an audio engineer, I can tell you right now, sound carries different and does different things in a 70% humid environment. That's just physics. Like, I'd love to tell you that things don't sound muddy, but they do. Totally different than a crisp, clean mountain evening. You know? If
I was President Biden right now, I would go for the Hail Mary pass, and I would level with the American people about what's been going on with all these subjects, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And if he wants to be president again, he needs to do more to tell us about these phenomena. All of these phenomena that you and I are talking about here are associated with special access programs.
Yes.
And it's not being shared with the American people who are paying for it.
Yeah.
And the person who told me that, was Hal Puthoff at the Urban Conference, SSE. He told it to the whole audience. He said it was.
He told me that personally at breakfast when I asked him to come on my show. He was like, "I'd love to be on your show. Unfortunately, I'm read on to way too many things." And I was like,
"That's exactly what he told me."
I fully appreciate that.
He said it's all stovepiped, and he told me that it's a threat to American science because nobody in these stovepipe programs, they can't talk to the guy at the other desk on the other side of the room. They're not even allowed to look at the desk of the other guy or gal in the room. And they reach these problems, and they can't talk to anyone about it, and it turns into a dead end. And it doesn't turn into a dead end in China or Russia, where they have a lot of open programs in this, and they talk about it. And there is a danger that our entire society is going to fall behind.
Yeah.
Because of this overclassification of these topics. I get the reasons: protect national security. My dad was in D-Day. He went to Omaha Beach. I know the reasons to have secrecy. You got to have surprise sometimes. At the same time, you can't classify everything.
Yeah.
You're just creating a totally dumbed down proletarian society.
Yeah, no, and that is an absolute truth. And when you look at the fact of, and believe me, folks, you can say what you want about, secretive Skinwalker Ranch, things like that. The Bigelow Institute definitely got some commas and zeros for a good decade doing their work out there into that. Yeah. And that's still under wraps. And that's part of the reason why they're having the issues they're having, is because they can't even get access to the research that was done on their own property. No. So,
they can't get access to the research that was done. And I asked them about this when we had a tour of Bigelow Aerospace at the IRBA SSE meeting in Vegas in 2018. There was a tour of Bigelow Aerospace set up by John Alexander, and it was a lot of fun going in there. But I finally asked them, people, our tour leader, what about the New York Times article that says that you have materials in a room here that is completely airtight, atmosphere has been pulled out of it so that if the life forms emerged, they wouldn't pose a threat? And do you have such a facility? And they just laughed at it and made jokes, and we don't comment on these things. But it was in a New York Times heard again about it again. James Lukatsky, Skinwalker to the Pentagon, that they NHI materials, and they were getting these grants for this from the federal government, and they can't talk about it. They still can't talk about it. So, what are we doing to ourselves with all this excessive secrecy?
Yeah, no, precisely, because what ends up happening is good people like Hal Puthoff, who once again, that seminal work years ago led to remote viewing, led to ideas of quantum entanglement, all kinds of stuff. You end up with people like him who, get into this collimated system where once they're read in, even though that topic may branch onto something else, they immediately read them onto that so that they can't talk about that either. And it's interesting to see it because sometimes it's quite literally projects that they aren't even working on or don't even have interest in, but they'll still read them in on the topic so that they can't go out and talk about the technologies that are adjunct between what they're working on and the other possible uses.
No, it's true. And I've run into several of these types of engineers who worked on these programs, and they told me point blank it wasn't Earth materials, it was from somewhere else, it was too advanced, it wasn't made of materials, isotopic ratios and all that you find on Earth. And then they'd say, I can't ever talk about this again, I already told you too much, just forget the conversation. And they get up and walk away. And you just talk to someone that examined now technology from another part of the galaxy. Which just that alone, it's mind-boggling for society just to have these conversations, to have radio, podcast conversations like we're having now every day, all over the place, so everyone could. It would totally energize our economy in the biggest possible way, the way Star Trek energized our imaginations as young kids. We're talking about reality here. There's other civilizations, things that are physical, things that are non-physical, and some of them are here, some of them visit us. It's very complex, but that's what we need right now. And I just feel like no one is doing their job in the government, at least on this, what I can see, to break it open. Some people haven't. They've suffered some kind of inrush to do it a couple of months ago. There's a lot of blowback. Well, where are we? The Soviet Union? Have we become the new Soviet Union? Repressing everything, dissidents and free speech?
No, precisely. And we've, it's kind of scary sometimes, Doc, the way that things are just pushed aside, the way that hypothesis is pushed aside, the way that the box, even though they don't want it to be in a Kleenex box, called UFO. They'd much rather it be UAP. Still, if it doesn't fit in their box, they don't want to play with it. So once again, yeah, I think go ahead,
Chris. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who told me that their dads who had worked at Area 51, one of the facilities out there, Mercury, at some point in their life started talking about what they really did out there at Mercury or in Area 51, right?
Yeah.
And then kids asked them the next day, what were you talking about? And they say, don't ask me about it again. I can't talk about it. Our family could be hurt.
Yeah.
And then they were slightly drunk or something. They said something around the campfire about encountering extraterrestrials out there, extraterrestrial technology. I mean, I keep hearing this year in, year out from people whose dads worked out there. I do think they're all making it up. I don't think so. I think there's really things going on, and these people, as they get older, before they pass on, before they die, they maybe want to get it off their chest. That's what I wrote about in Black Swan Ghosts. I encountered some of these witnesses, including one whose dad flew wreckage to Roswell. And he didn't want to talk about it till about 2 weeks before he died in the hospital. He called each daughter into the hospital room and told her what those materials really were and how incredibly significant that event was. But they couldn't really talk about it openly because they were afraid there'd be retribution against the family. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what sort of led me to, by the way, there's a new Black Swan Ghost. I just released a second edition on Amazon. Yeah, you can see that little seal there. It shows it's the second edition.
Awesome.
So I'm not even looking for these people, Chris. I just do my thing as a remote viewing teacher and someone who's given crop circle tours. I keep running into these UFO ET witnesses whose parents worked in the military or even a long time ago worked at the Roswell Army Airfield, people like this. Why do these stories keep coming up again and again? I'm not even out there trying to find people like this. They run into me and they want to share their stories because they want to get it off their chest. This is a national issue of integrity and being ethical about telling the truth about who we are and what we've experienced. We can't grow unless we have that integrity.
Well, and that's just it. And, much as I say at the end of every episode of this, it takes open hearts and open minds to have a conversation. And without that, we don't move forward as humanity. Like, we've got to be ready to have the conversation and be willing to have it. It's not an easy conversation. It's not a fun one, but it's one that we have to have.
Yeah, and we don't know what the whole story is here. There could be some aspects of that could make us very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The non-human intelligence could already be here integrated amongst the population. I'm told that some of them look exactly like humans. And I could imagine our government saying, we don't quite know how to tell this yet. I mean, they could be here now, like in that movie, They Live.
No.
80s. Yeah. That is my best guess of what is going on, which is why we're not hearing more about it.
I would not doubt that one bit.
Come out. There are many people that are working to get the discussion going. Even Chuck Schumer, used to be my representative in New York, now senator.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer has pushed for this Schumer rounds, and so there are a lot of different people at different levels who know about what we're talking about and get it, and they're doing the best they can. It's just these programs are still classified, and nobody wants to go to jail over this for a long period of time. So this is what we're at, but I think it's moving in the right direction. Even a conversation like we just had right now. Thank you very much, Chris, for doing this. I think we moved the ball down the field a little bit. And that's what it's going to take.
It's what it's about, and I look at my show. There are numerous shows out there that, and yes, we share people's experiences. We talk to experiencers. We talk to people's who embryos have been taken, things like that. Authors, researchers, all kinds of stuff. But for me, it's more about demystifying topics than it is about hearsay and conjecture. For me, it's much more about being able to clear up because some of these are really like you start getting really deep into this, doctor, and this is quantum mechanics, quantum physics. This is heady stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you went Egon Spangler real quick, you know? And that's just it. It goes from history and folklore to quantum physics rapidly.
Right. Why not? Let's go there. I mean, it's high time.
Yeah.
It's only going to have, it's going to be it's going to be disorienting for a few years or decades. You're going to feel like your sense of reality got knocked out from under you. But this is where we're going. We just need to start and get the conversation going. We'll survive this because we always have in the past.
Yep.
When scientific revolutions happened, we weren't the center of the universe, and it was the heliocentric. All these things happened, and we're still here. We survived this, and we have each other to talk to.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little scary. I know it's going to be scary.
Well,
I know it's going to be scary, but we'll deal with it. It's better than being little kids in nursery school pretending it's not real.
Well, and you know, it's an idea that I discuss pretty regularly. The idea that I'm coming up on 50 years old. I remember a day where I rode my bike to the public library to look up a topic. I didn't have the internet. I had a microfiche and a card catalog, and maybe the downtown Houston library if they had a book on file, you know, that they could send to my public library, or that I could go reserve and go downtown and get. You know, we didn't wake up knowing in 1980 what the news was in Poughkeepsie every morning in the palm of our hand. Our society has changed. The way that we take in data has changed. The way that we filter data has changed. And we need to look at that. We need to look at that as a people, as a humanity, and as a scientific community. Right. You know, the way, because as opposed to then where it was a decent faucet where you could control how fast it was going into the glass. Now it's like using that same glass in a torrential downpour at the end of a gutter. You know, that glass gets full real quick. The colander can't even filter the information. It just goes over the edge. So
exactly. And that's why it's going to be a black swan event, because we have spent so many years denying the reality. But you have Congress and senators are getting briefings. It seems they're being shown films of crash retrievals and extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
Our senators and Congress people are being shown this in classified briefings from the Pentagon. Before we finish up, I was working in Austria at a research institute this summer that East Germany ceased to exist. And I was working with East German scientists at this East-West Research Institute, EASA, Institute International Super Applied Systems Analysis. I mean, within a couple of months of that summer, East Germany ceased to exist. No one predicted it. No one predicted it.
Yeah.
What happened after that? One East Bloc country after another disappeared from the map and became a free society, or we consider to be a free society, without totalitarian control. And then a year dissolved with Gorbachev and then Yeltsin. And did anyone predict that? Did anyone in our intelligence agencies see that coming? No. You don't see these things coming. The more it's repressed, the bigger the rubber band snaps back. That's where we're at with these topics. Yeah.
Well, we've got you for about another 3 minutes. What do you see happening when this bubble bursts? Because it will eventually get to a point that there's so much hot air in that bubble that it's going to pop. You know, either that or it rises to a point where the tension just doesn't hold anymore and it pops. You know.
Right, exactly right. That's exactly what's going to happen, Chris. And I know that the powers that be want to hold this back. I don't know exactly why. Is there a terrible secret behind all of this that's too tough, they think, for people to handle? You alluded to some of it. Research abductions, maybe that's just too much. But it's like Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, a book I read in high school in the 70s. He had future shock coming from technology, right? Changing faster than we could adapt. And this my dissertation in sociology was about this idea. But it happens with information and knowledge too. And it's going to happen with these topics. There's only so much you can try to bury your head in the sand before reality fixes things up for you. I mean, reality has a way of catching up with you, like future shock. It's going to happen. And I never imagined getting involved from remote viewing to crop circles to UFOs.
Yeah.
Bigfoot and cryptids. But they all connected in a very neat line. I didn't expect this to happen. And the more I research all these topics, there's hundreds of thousands of witnesses, Chris. And there's more all the time. And we're sharing information through the internet and shows like this in a way we never did 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a different time for when there was just the Art Bell show on at night, and that was your main source for paranormal information, in the 90s. And
yeah.
that was like the main thing. But now we can do this parallel paths simultaneously on different shows every single night, and it's just it just is going to be like the Soviet Union. It's going to collapse, the existing paradigm, and it's going to be replaced by all these topics and all the experiencers and people. And I think it'll be a good thing because there's a ton to learn here about how reality really works, and I think we'll be okay. We will figure out what reality we really live in. Who wouldn't want to know where you really live, not the fantasy you were taught in kindergarten? Yeah.
No, exactly. And I, as you, believe that we are in for a huge, drastic change when it happens, but I hold nothing but hope for humanity and for the future of what these possibilities may bring. When I hear things like, I could get worried about CERN and what they do, I guess. But when I hear news stories like CERN makes matter from light, that's just wow. And that is humanity changing.
Yeah.
That's 3 steps away from replicator. Give me a
shocking,
black
Chris.
coffee.
We've been held back for 70.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. No. That's where it's going.
No,
it's going to that world, and let's start tonight, because
well, that's
the
just
older reality is just crumbling around us as we're doing the show. It's crumbling. And any politician that won't engage these subjects is going to be at a huge disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Versus those that are open to talking about this.
Yep. And much, and the same thing with science. The people who are not ready to be the new Magellans and take it to what we think is the edge of the known disc that we live on, and find out, nope, not a disc. I made it back. We need new Magellans. We need new people who are willing to go out on that scientific limb of exploration, So I'm happy that there are still good researchers like you out there doing field research. Like I'd love to get you on a better connection. But you're literally out in the field right now. Like
we'll do it again.
You found a way to get connections so that you could come on the show tonight. But you're actively out in the field doing research right now, and that's what it's about, is being able to go out there, being able to put these new paradigms to work and to the test. So thank you for that, Doctor.
I will leave us. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your show. And I will leave it with this 2 words, plus ultra, which was an inscription on the Straits of Gibraltar 500 years ago. As explorers left the Mediterranean, they saw the Pillars of Hercules. It said plus ultra, which means to go beyond, or more beyond, in Latin. Say it's time for plus ultra. Let's go beyond. They had the courage to do it 500 years ago. It's time to do it again.
That's right. Absolutely true. We need to have you on again sometime very soon, Doctor. This has been more than illuminating and more than enjoyable.
Okay, thanks for Chris.
So
I guarantee the connection will be better next time.
No worries. It was fantastic. You take care, and safe travels, safe research out there in the field.
Thanks, Chris. Talk soon.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Take care. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work, sorry, folks. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work of Dr. Simeon Hein over at mountbaldy.com, everybody, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all of our guest books at curiousrealm.com/store. That's also where you can get your copy of the all-new field observation and encounter log. If you are a paranormal researcher, if you're out in the field like Dr. Hein doing experiments, stop on by and grab your copy of the field observation and encounter log. It's a great way for you to be able to catalog all of your research right there in your back pocket in the field as it happens. When we come back from this quick commercial break, everybody, we will be joined by our good friend, Dr. John Hall. We will be talking about targeted individuals and targeting technology, but a different kind of technology, a new kind of targeting technology, a technology that we were all exposed to a couple years ago, and how this technology may well have done hippocampal damage to our brains to allow for means of control. We will be getting into that with Dr. John Hall right after this.
Attention all Ground Zero fans. Aftermath.media is celebrating our 4-year anniversary with a spectacular deal just for you. Wow! For a limited time, you can get an Aftermath Premium yearly subscription for only $79. That's right, just $79 for a full year of exclusive content, ad-free listening, and premium features. Dive into a world of incredible stories, top-tier journalism, and the best in entertainment. Whether you're a longtime listener or new to Ground Zero, this is the perfect time to join the Aftermath family. Don't miss out on this amazing anniversary special. Visit Aftermath.media today and sign up for your Aftermath Premium yearly subscription at just $79. But hurry, this offer won't last long. Celebrate with us and elevate your media experience to the next level. Aftermath.media, the ultimate resource for parapolitical and paranormal fans. Visit Aftermath.media and subscribe today. That's Aftermath.media.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for staying around through that quick commercial break. And also, thank you so much to our sponsors, especially WebWorks Wireless. They're your source for high-speed internet for all. WebWorksWireless.com, everybody. No data limits, no throttling, no credit checks, no contracts. I have been using WebWorks Wireless since the beginning of Curious Realm. They are who we live stream our website feed through, and all across the country using their wireless router. I have gotten nothing but amazing connection. We've never had a drop, never had an issue during live streams to our website. So stop on by and check them out, everybody. WebWorksWireless.com is the website that you want to use. Our guest in this segment, our good friend, Dr. John Hall, author of Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control, as well as Satellite Weapons, a New Breed, here to talk about one of our passion topics here on the show, targeted individuals and targeting technology. Welcome back, Dr. John Hall. How are you doing, buddy?
Good, Chris. How are you doing?
Doing okay, man. I have been busy. You've been out speaking. It's nice to see you actively out speaking again and doing speaking engagements and getting word out about these things, because I think it is one of the most important topics out there, whether people are a targeted individual or not, Doctor. It's the idea of knowing that the technology exists and knowing that it's out there for good. It's out there for nefarious purpose. You know, like I myself make binaural beats. You could very well make binaural beats for all kinds of horrible purposes if you wanted to, you know. But yeah, I think it's important that people understand that this technology is real and exists.
Well, you know, and that's kind of, I mean, your show has been influential on that. And certainly, for those that don't know, Chris does create binaural beats, for me for some of the, targeted individuals that reach out. And there's a kind of a systematic, you know, way that, we combine bone conduction technology with binaural beats that kind of helps defeat the programs that are being directed, at them. But, you're right. I mean, as far as I am kind of back out doing a little bit of touring, I've actually got a speaking engagement coming up in September called Mind Nexus. It's September 27th through 29th in Tucson, Arizona. That I'll be there live. For, you know, some of my followers and stuff know that I had a daughter 3 years ago. She just turned 3, so that's kind of occupied a lot of my time, and having to just probably be a little bit safer about, you know, some of the outreach that I do now than I was before. But it's come a long way just in the time that I've known you and the speaking engagements and the shows that we've done together. You know, 10, 15 years ago, when, you know, I first started writing about this, it was a topic that truly nobody had heard of. When you talked about, you know, people hearing voices in their head that are truly being directed to them, and it's a form of communication, not mental illness, and the targeting with directed energy type weapons, and the stalking, it was new. And when you talked about that, I mean, you were, you know, almost always, you know, kind of pegged as crazy, and, you know, the tinfoil hat comments that people would make. But it's kind of come full circle. And now that it is one of the most probably common crimes described on the internet, and it's gone full circle from people saying, "Man, that just sounds like craziness. I've never heard of that," to even people who don't necessarily believe it and haven't experienced it themselves will admit, you know, all of a sudden now you're talking to people and go, "You know what? I've got a cousin. You know, I've got a daughter, or I've got a son, or, you know, my wife thinks that's happening to her, or we know somebody, there's a guy on our block that's happening to." I mean, almost every family has someone involved in the family, directly or indirectly, that has experienced some form of this targeting, you know, whether it's the gang stalking, or whether it's the pain from directed energy weaponry, or it's the voice to skull technology. But it's really, you know, I mean, I'm certainly not trying to take all the credit, because there's a lot of other people talking about it. But, you know, at least we've done our job as far as exposing it enough, which I remember early on talking it with interviews with you, saying, you know, I don't care if people necessarily believe anything I've got to say, but I want them to hear it, because eventually it's going to come back to haunt them. And that way, when one of their loved ones says, "I think there's cameras in the house," I'm hearing somebody telling me what I'm wearing and describing, you know, exactly what I'm thinking, or what I'm wearing, or what I'm about to wear. At least that person will go, "You know what? There was a guy on Dudes and Beer. There was a guy on Curious Realm that was talking about this exact same thing." You know, and I've said all along that was the main impetus for these books. You know, so that way, it's not the family members of the person that's it happening to doesn't immediately say, "You need a psychiatrist," because that psychiatrist 99.5% of the time is going to victimize that person a second time.
Yeah, and quite literally unintentionally victimize them a second time. It's kind of a horrifying cycle, you know, the concept of just a victim denial to begin with, which is a thing. It's out there, you know. Even the idea of the majority of molestations, rapes, things like that go unaccounted for, and staticized because nobody reports them, because they think nobody will believe them. And sadly enough, that kind of victim mindset is all too common. And also one of the things that leads into this to begin with, is the idea that from a distance, somebody can not only read your thoughts, read your intentions, but actively be able to influence them as well. And I'm popping up an article right now from New York Post. Is this the future? Wild new tech can read someone's mind with shocking accuracy. And last time we had you on, we talked about the MIT study that was just done where using regular, MRIs and other techniques, they were able to have people listen to a Pink Floyd song, then come back a week later and record them thinking about it and reassemble the song.
Well, and if you remember 10 years ago, out in California, there was a group, and these aren't government groups, these are private groups, civilian groups, that they actually were able to use functional MRI and decode the temporal and parietal areas of the brain, the visual centers, and have somebody watch film footage and then think about that film footage later and decode it from the brain back into a visual film image. And and if you remember, one of the ones that went around for a long time, they had a guy watched a plane land, and then they decoded it, put it back into a visual code, I guess, and then could replay it directly from the guy's thoughts onto a screen for other people to see. So, and this was probably more than a decade ago now. And that was using, civilian technology that's nowhere near what the government has. So,
yeah, and scientists in Japan have found a way to visually image your dreams to actively show them on screen. There's all kinds of interesting things. Here's the idea right here of them being able to pull images straight out of your dreams. Scientists can pluck images out of your dreams from Popular Science. This is 2013 that this technology came about. And when you look at especially things like the biosignal sensing device using dynamic selection of electrodes, this sounds really out there, but a wearable electronic device includes a housing and electrode carrier attached to the housing and non-planar surface. The wearable electronic device includes a sensor circuit and switching circuit. The switching circuit is operable to electronically connect a number of different subsets and sets into the sensor circuit. Now, this right here, brain activity, can be monitored using electrodes on the scalp of the user. These are actively earbuds that have been patented by Apple in 2023. Earbuds that have brainwave sensing capability.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to keep heading down that route. Then you have Neuralink. Yeah, it's already out to start actively, chipping the brains with an internal chip. And then some time ago, they also figured out that, you can use certain wavelengths of light that actually penetrate the skull without actually having to put a burr through the skull. Then with, little micro nanofibers of graphene in the brain, control those nanofibers of graphene through light going through the skull. So, there's incredible ways coming out now that you can control the brain, without actually having to put anything on the scalp, and certainly not have to put anything in the brain itself, which was one of the reasons, the control technologies was one of my books, because there's a bunch of different ways to control somebody, and we're constantly being bombarded with it now. There's, 5G that's all around us now. You've got UN, and World Economic Forum forces that are that are really pushing, what used to be called Agenda 21, but, is, trying to push us into urban centers. They really don't want people living in rural areas anymore that are harder to control. If everybody's pushed into urban centers like these smart cities, that they're trying to create, you're easier to control. You're certainly easier to infect with viruses, when that time comes. We're truly, as we were talking about earlier before we went on the air, we're heading down a dystopian road, I fear. And, especially with, there's other things that we're going to talk about, tonight that have come to light that has been troubling me some, and that I'm going to be talking about in September, in Tucson, that are, some other things that I've been kind of researching with some other people that, some of which has to do with COVID, because it was, when COVID hit, I knew there had to be some control factor, coming out with that, other than the lockdowns. The lockdowns, that was physical control in itself. That was, governments wanting to see how far they could push the envelope, and shutting you down, making you get a vaccine that was, really unproven. And we call that early on your show that there was going to be issues with that vaccine, and certainly there was. And I think we all know, people that have had some clotting issues and myocarditis issues, from that. But, it's not just, energy type weapons that are being used for control. They're using viruses for control. They're using vaccines for control. And one of the things I kind of started looking into is, the putting voices in somebody's head is one thing. Bombarding people with electromagnetic energy is one thing. But what part of the brain specifically are they really trying to get at? And me, along with some other people that are doing some research, something we kind of think we may have kind of come to the conclusion that most of this stuff seems to be targeting the hippocampus. And if you look at some of the studies, some of the researchers that are researching Alzheimer's disease and dementia, it's a lot of the theory of how dementia actually progresses deals with, the cells in the hippocampus. The hippocampus of the brain is where memories are formed, long-term and short-term memories are formed. And if you really want to control the population, you've got to do away or alter the memories and the cognition of the people who remember what it was like to live in a society where you had freedom and you had privacy. Or you can wait for that generation to die off, but that the powers that be globally are wanting, a global unity, world economic power, kind of one world economic power a little sooner than that. So.
And specifically when you're talking about the function of the hippocampus, especially when you're talking about the tissue damage done to the victims of Havana syndrome, the so-called immaculate concussion, when you're talking about arresting development or arresting barriers of the hippocampus, not only is the hippocampus for memory, things like that, it is also directly tied to the amygdala.
Yep.
The amygdala is a huge emotional processor. It's also that quote reptilian brain, and part of your panic center. Where uncontrolled panic comes from. So
well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another piece of the puzzle that we're slowly figuring out is, if you constantly bombard the public with fear, and you keep them in a heightened state of anxiety, that in itself damages the hippocampus too. Yeah. Hippocampus is one part of the brain that no matter how old you get, it has the ability to regenerate, new neurons.
Very plastic in that way.
Yeah. And you want to keep that part of your brain healthy, because that's what keeps you from getting Alzheimer's. That's what keeps you being able to critically think. But if you look at it kind of from, and I've mentioned this to you on your show before, when I do lectures in front of people, it's only the people that are, I would say, mid to late 40s and up that are really concerned with anything I've got to say too much, and are concerned with having privacy, concerned with having the government in their heads or the government controlling them. When I'm talking to universities, and most of the audience is, let's say late 20s to early 30s, they're already pretty well indoctrinated. That's the group that I'll hear, well, that's all well and good. You figured out how the government's trying to control us, but if you're not doing anything wrong, what's it matter if the government knows everything about you? Or, we grew up, having every single aspect of our biometrics and our educational system and everything documented. The government already knows everything there is to know about us. You're not going to be able to stop any of that. So why even be concerned about it?
I grew up quite literally in the 1980s, Doctor, with them taking our fingerprints every few years to put into a, quote, database in case you were kidnapped. Because you know how they're going to find you is like your fingerprints in a Foley's. Like they're going to find the missing 8-year-old by their fingerprints. That's how they're going to find them. No, man, I don't think that's why they were putting my fingerprints into a database at all. But those are the things that we were told with regularity. Well,
and even better than that, I think it's been since about 1980 that, every child gets a heel stick right at birth, whether the parents want it or not, to evaluate that child for PKU, for phenylketonuria. Well, I don't know how many people with phenylketonuria, but I'm a physician, and in 30 years of practice, I think I've seen one.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that heel stick is going into a DNA database someplace probably, and not, or at least was early on was being saved for that type of thing. Now it probably is going directly in a DNA database. Well,
as opposed to many years ago where it would have to stick in a database, things like that. I think it would be a totally different intake process now, and much easier to store that than having to hold a hard file of a DNA stick, like what would have been considered an archive back in the day. But yeah, like once again, there have been programs for years to cull this information from people. Good God, I remember the year that we met, probably about 6 months before I went to work at InfoWars. Where I first met you was a conference that I worked. It was a white hat conference at UT, a security conference, like for hacking, white hat hacking and security testing, things like that. And one of the former heads of FBI cybersecurity was there speaking. Now, this was 2012, still well before the full-on smartphone age that we have now. And he said 5 years before, with 85% accuracy, with only cell phone data, they could predict where anybody in the U.S. would be in 15 minutes. That would have been in the days of a flip phone, maybe at the most a BlackBerry. So not 5G, not that kind of communication, not like having the internet browser on your phone, things like that, cookies, history, just simply your phone location and that metadata alone. They could predict where you would be within 15 minutes with an 85% accuracy rate. That's frightening.
I know. Probably the reason that Facebook is now called Meta.
And I have literally heard people with lapel stars and things like that up on stage talking at other conferences about, we've been waiting years to be able to mass swap this kind of data. Like it's wild. It's out there. The technology is there. I mean, quite literally, that is the job of AI. Even our good friend, Robert Duncan, that's what he's busy building an AI for right now, is tracking people who may be tracking targeted individuals. So there's a whole realm of technology out there right now that the average user is not necessarily aware of.
Well, and that's kind of what me and some other researchers have been kind of coming to the conclusion that almost everything coming at you now is geared to control you or monitor you in one way or another. And, a good for instance is, you've been to my place. I live out in the country and got horses and animals and getting a little old, getting tired of shoveling manure. So I thought, it'd be nice to have a little skid steer, a little bobcat, it'd be a lot easier just to move this stuff around, mechanically. And I just did a never so quick, brief search, skid steer, about how much am I looking at spending with a, Kubota or a Mahindra or a Cat or a Bobcat. Literally for the last 5 days, every ad coming across my Facebook page now has been for skid steers, so, that's one of the ways that they control you. But, back to the hippocampus thing, it looks like that really is the way. There's multiple studies out now that are showing that electromagnetic energy, destroys the ability of the hippocampus to generate new index neurons, which would be the neurons that allow you to isolate, memories long-term and short-term. And I tell you what, everything appears like the powers that be at Davos and World Economic Forum are certainly wanting what I term in my new book that I'm still trying to get out, the fourth branch of technocracy, where, it's a kind of a global domination of, the world economic system by a handful of players like Soros and Bezos and, the people that are going to supply you, exactly what you need. The people at Davos that have said, that AI will replace a lot of the white collar jobs, mechanization will replace a lot of the blue collar jobs. Yeah. And now we're going to have a bunch of useless people that we need something to do. And, that one Israeli economist already said, well, we'll get them addicted to drugs into various sports games or electronic games. So, that is kind of at least the future that they're looking to cause. And one of the ways they're doing it is through, attacking the human brain. And I know early on, with regards to the targeting aspect of it, we were scanning people and, looking for, chips, Verichip type chips, and 20 years ago, that's what we were finding. Well, then we stopped finding them, the people were still voicing complaints, but we weren't finding them. So talking to, Delgado and some of these, former MK Ultra scientists before they passed away, even then they were saying that implantation would be a thing of the past, that all of this would be done, by transmitting, to the people. And well, now it's even gone further than that. We were talking about DNA database. Well, why would the government want your DNA? Well, certainly you can match DNA up to solve crimes and things like that. You can determine what somebody's medical outcomes are going to be, maybe prevent heart disease or diabetes or, genetic, mishaps. There's some good that can come of it, but there's also some horrible that can become of it, because a lot of these people that are working on viruses like the one we just had, these viruses now can be, gain of function, research can be done on them to change them to attack certain cultures and certain races and certain genders. And, they can use that DNA to design viruses to attack at whatever aspect of that DNA that they want to do. And I think we talked about that a little bit on your show when COVID first hit, especially with some of our gain of function, talks. But if it turns out that with COVID specifically, the S1 subunit of that virus and of the subunit that gets caused by when you have the mRNA vaccine in your body does indeed attack the hippocampus. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about in Tucson. That, why would they want to attack your hippocampus? Well, it's because that's where you lay down autobiographical memory, and that's where you can, get older people, either put them straight up into, a demented state, because you certainly want to get rid of, the older population. And then you can lay down new memories, that are with the younger population. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I think we're going to, as a society, recognizing that, in modern society, that as a group, our brains are under attack, that we're going to have to formulate a way to protect ourselves from that. And, in the past with targeted individuals, we were looking for a way to shield from that and looking at a way to find a possible chip. And, with nanotechnology, that's going to be hard to find. And now with viral technology, there's really nothing to find. I mean, you're going to have to just figure out ways to keep your brain healthy, keep the hippocampus healthy, and lower neuroinflammation, which seems to be, what's happening as far as, mind control now. I guess what I'm saying is the modern form of chipping now may indeed be viral from here on out.
Well, and what's interesting is even whenever you just use the term mind control, you could use it loosely for all I care. When you are talking about the specific way in which information is fed to people, when you are talking about taking advantage of known ways to bypass the filter of communication. I mean, we have laws on the books specifically against subliminal film and things like that for a reason, because we know it works.
Yeah.
We know it works. And I have never said that there are subliminal images in your television, anything like that. Don't get me wrong. However, to say that a 30 hertz frame rate of an analog TV, aka the boob tube, doesn't put you into a hypnotic state after a few minutes is silly. It does. It's shown by science to do so. So when you start multiplying that and you get to the point of a 4K TV in every room, flickering at 120 hertz per second, you're going to get to that point faster. The way that information is taken in by a brain that's worn out by that flicker rate is different. It's different. It processes the information in a different way because it's now in an auto-hypnotic state to begin with. So when 3/4 of the news is nothing but horrible things, when it's all nothing but divisive information, things like that, when you look at both sides, doesn't matter which side you're talking about, and they're both saying, look at that, look at that, look at that, pointing it the other way, you eventually come to a point where your brain can't process anything but that fight, Doctor.
That's right. And if you notice, I mean, most of us go to work and then we come home, and what do? We click on the news, and we're fed one distressful thing after another on the nightly news. Yeah. And then we go to bed and whether you perceive it as an anxious state or not, your brain goes to bed in an anxious state. Right when, your hippocampus should be regenerating when you're asleep, and instead it's continuing to kill off more cells. Yeah, instead your has been activated. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, putting you into a state. And I mean, I remember my mom used to have restless sleep. I don't have a television in my room anymore for that reason. Whenever I'm on the road, I don't turn a TV on before I go to sleep, anything like that. Like I normally fall asleep to music or something along those lines. But I remember she would always complain about bad sleep. And it's like, man, we live in Houston, Texas. You watch the news as you fall asleep. Like you could not get a more horrifying news report at 10 p.m. than the body count of like accidents and shootings and robberies and things like that's what you're absorbing into your brain as you're lulling off to sleep. And you wonder
why you might have a disturbed sleep pattern. You know?
Well, and that's one of the things we found that, I mean, and unfortunately, I mean, the business that you and I both are in require us to keep up with current events, you know, and the news. So, and I've been as guilty of it as I'm sure you have been, that we're up at, you know, midnight, you know, clicking through channels and saying, oh, okay, where's the latest update? And, you know, what's happening in this political arena, or what's happening, what balloons, you know, floating over the United States now, or who's got bombed. And, you know, so, you know, but, you know, when we figured out that the S1 subunit of a spike protein from that virus was designed specifically to cross the blood-brain barrier, and there's not a lot of things that do cross the blood-brain barrier, it had to be done with intent. You know, and you could tell that by the fear and cleavage sites that were on that. You know, it's my belief that, you know, we had to kind of play the game early on a lot of our shows and a lot of our interviews. You know, maybe it was, you know, a gain of function research that created this. Well, you know, the bat that virus came from was in one, you know, area of China, you know, probably one cave, that particular species. It's not like it was a species of bat that was all over the place. They figured out early on that it didn't come from the wet market. And it was American money going to help finance the research in Wuhan lab. And, you know, our fear is that if they are going down the route where, you know, if you need to control a big swipe of the population, you're not going to do it by drugging people and chipping them with a chip through a needle. You know, and you can try to convince people to take a chip. They tried that early on. Take a chip in your wrist. You know, you can use it, all your financial data. You just wave your wrist. You can get your coffee at Starbucks. You know, well, you know, not many people are going to bite on that. So, and they figured that out early on, that the ease of being able to use your bank account with a chip in your wrist or in your hand just didn't fly.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the people at the very top that are the controllers, not the controlled, that are looking for a way that they can control the biggest swipe of the population as they can, you know, well, the beta test got done a couple of years ago. You know, COVID, and I said all along, I think this is a beta test. They need to see how quickly they can disseminate a virus that, you know, is fatal, but not too fatal. And they figured it out, you know, that how quickly can you get this to spread throughout Europe? How quickly can you get it to the United States and get it to sweep to the United States? And
when you look, I've got it up from I've got ncbi.nlm.nih.gov up right now, folks, about, and the title of the study is The Functional and Structural Changes of the Hippocampus of COVID-19 Patients. And right here in the first pages, studies have extensively illustrated that long COVID after discharge from hospital consists of an assortment of neuropsychiatric complaints, such as defective insistent verbal memory and learning, deferred verbal memory difficulties, verbal fluency problems, working memory issues, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. These are quite literally the exact same symptomology of sufferers of Havana syndrome. That's pretty wild.
Yep.
That is pretty intense to see that, like, the same issues that they had that appeared as now has there been anything to show, because of course there was the studies that were done on the actual brain scans of the Havana syndrome patients to show the actual brain tissue damage, things like that. Do the scans of COVID-19 patients with the same symptomology happen to look the same?
Now, I don't know if anybody's done. Now, those are diffusion tensor imaging scans, DTIs, that they did to find that on the Havana syndrome. I don't know if anybody. I don't know if anybody has done any DTI studies on long COVID patients yet. But then, now let's take a scenario that I'm kind of afraid of, is what's the next virus that's going to come down the pike? And, you know, Bill Gates has already said there's going to be another one. So, you know, I have no reason to doubt it, that there will be, because they know that
swine flu.
Yeah.
The ones that were done pre-COVID that tended to match a whole lot. And even right now, there's the bird flu, which has crossed over to human right here in the United States. Cases right here in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, combining a virus that's designed to, like, let's say, just because the one we've been dealing with is COVID. Take a virus that's designed to create a spike protein or a immunization that in your body that is designed to basically trick your body into producing the spike protein. But then the S1 subunit of the spike protein has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. So you have it attacking the hippocampus at the same time that you're bombarding somebody with electromagnetic energy that's doing the same thing. So, I mean, you have a combination of two factors that's able to accelerate that kind of destruction. So you have somebody that's already you're giving them fatigue, you're giving them, a change in their ability to critically think. You're bombarding them with bad news and anxiety, and in the previous case, you're locking them down. Well, what better way to control the population than that? I mean, and if you notice, the people who really believed in taking the immunizations, the vaccines, you couldn't convince them otherwise. I mean, no, I've got to get, every booster that comes out, I'm not going to get sick and die. And it's the people that aren't getting the vaccines that are causing all the illness. Well, that vaccine never prevented anyone from getting COVID. So, I mean, and the boosters didn't either. As a matter of fact, it was, well elucidated that natural immunity from surviving the disease, lasted longer than any of the mRNA vaccines.
Yeah.
And the one vaccine that wasn't mRNA, with Johnson & Johnson, they immediately vilified it, said it had the most side effects of any of the vaccines. Not to get that one. That was going to be the vaccine that was going to harm you. Take the mRNA vaccine. Well, the mRNA vaccines were the ones that actually cause your body to produce the spike protein. The Johnson & Johnson was a traditional vaccine. So, it wouldn't actually harness your body's mechanisms of production to produce the spike protein. So, I'm imagining that the reason Johnson & Johnson was vilified early is they really didn't want most of the population getting that. They wanted you to get one of the mRNA vaccines, which now have been banned, in some states and in some countries. So, but I think they still gathered the information that they needed, which was figuring out how they could spread something population-wide globally. And that's the even scarier thought, is that they've got that information now. So let's say they want to create a virus that is meant to depopulate the planet by 50%. Well, they know how to spread that virus now.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was the whole idea that, even the whole Wuhan lab, when we quit funding it, supposedly, when France left, because they were a partner in building it originally, when they left, they shot warning flags in the air to the UN saying that China was actively trying to make ethno-specific viruses. Like that, they threw the warning flag up at that point. And it was interesting to see that, like, that was a program that they were looking at.
Well, and I've said before, a lot of the places that you can send your blood sample to check your ancestry and your DNA and things like that, they found out that a lot of that was going directly to China for their DNA database. So, I don't doubt for a second that there hasn't been viruses that have been worked on, and even, which I posted on my Facebook page, some 3 years ago, was a synopsis, a pretty long synopsis on gain of function, where, even our national security interests were worried about the gain of function research that was being done in China at that time that was being directed at cultural bias in DNA. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues coming our way in society right now, and I'm not sure what the answers are, but I know our ability to critically think and see some of this is going to be dependent on us keeping our brains healthy, because they figured out that the quickest way to control the population, I think, is through destruction of, mass destruction of hippocampal tissue.
Well,
in the public.
And once again, even with or without the assistance of COVID or anything like that, the regular barrage, not allowing your brain to heal will do it in and of itself. The regular barrage of negativity and horrible things and bad things that put you into a state of fight or flight survival, that put an anxious person on edge, that kind of stuff. The regularity of that in and of itself will be a means and is a means of control. No different than keeping somebody awake for days to break them.
Well, and part of the reason what really piqued my interest, especially after me and several other people sat down and really looked at, how our government responded to COVID. And the answer was vaccine, 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 get the shot, get the shot, get the shot. There was very little attention to treatment, and as a physician, I remember, and we talked about this. There was as a physician, people were coming and, I got COVID, what should I do? And the patent response that they wanted us to give was, well, you need to get the vaccine. Well, I've already got the disease. What do I treat this? Oh, well, just, take aspirin and, take cool baths and try to keep your temperature down. And, you're going to be okay. But if you were one of the doctors that tried to put that patient on hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, oh boy, you were, the pharmacist is going to report you to the board. Board was going to delicense you. That was unapproved treatment. Don't matter that half of the stuff we use in pain management is unapproved. But, God forbid, don't try ivermectin or don't try hydroxychloroquine. You send those patients to get the shot. You send them to get the jab. So, looking back especially, and even at the time, we're going, okay. As physicians, if there's a chance that something can work and has a pretty slim chance of hurting you, why not try it? Because it's not like this is a novel virus. This isn't something that we've had to treat before.
Yeah.
There's no guidelines for treatment, and certainly a vaccine isn't treatment. And that vaccine wasn't even prevention.
Yeah.
So, but, it got to a point where, that's why they were saying, lock up the ivermectin at Tractor Supply and behind on the shelf for animal use, because people are going to start taking it. And, if you tried to prescribe it from a pharmacist, they would ask you as a physician straight out, is this for COVID or is this for worms? And if it was for COVID, you weren't even going to get the human version that we use of ivermectin.
Well, there was tons of that. There was definitely tons of it, because it came out here recently that the Pentagon had a disinformation program going on in China, all kinds of things. So it is beyond incomprehensible to think that kind of stuff doesn't exist to me. Whenever you're talking about CRISPR being something that you can go and basically order off of the internet and start doing genetic work in your own garage. And speaking of studies, things like that, in our last few minutes here, there's a study also at NIH.gov about staying informed without a cost. No effect of positive news media on stress reactivity, memory, and effects in young adults. And this was done on 62 participants between the age of 18 and 35. 81% were women, randomly exposed to either positive or neutral news segments, followed by a lab stressor. They assessed the participants 3 times during the procedure and measured cortisol and saliva 8 times. And 24 hours later, participants were contacted. It was interesting to see the fact that positive news, regular news, didn't really change anything. But the cortisol levels spiked like crazy with negative news. With negative news, the cortisol levels went up amazingly well. So there it is once again, the fact that there are so many means of control out there. And it starts with the victimization of a victimized mentality to begin with. You know, and that's I think something that you wisely advise just about every targeted individual out there with, is the idea that they need to get familiar with their own voice, with who they are, and know that the things that they may be hearing that may be telling them horrible things are not them. And that they can help break that cycle of victimization by bringing themselves to a point of understanding that there's something else out there.
No, and that's true. And that's one of the things that I've always tried to get across, that especially for the people who are being targeted on the programs where they are getting voice to skull, which is, you know, voices that are trying to compel them to do things or tell them to do things, or
exactly
convince them that the targeting will stop if they do this dastardly deed. You know, don't listen. You know, none of that is being directed at you, honestly. If it is one of the programs that, you know, that somebody's trying to convince you that you're hearing a deity or God or an angel or something, nothing good is going to tell you to take up arms and kill another person or a group of people. You know, so, and doing that is not going to actually, you know, save yourself or get your targeting to change. If you're experiencing that, you know, reach out to one of the groups, that support groups that you can find online. If you Google targeted individual, you're going to find, you know, Freedom from Covert Harassment and a number of other groups that you can reach out to. But, you know, don't take things into your own hands and go on a shooting spree or anything like that. But because a lot of times that's what they're actually trying to cause. So.
Well, and that's just it. You know, once again, when we first met, it was Aaron Alexis and his ELF, extremely low frequency rifle. There was the young disturbed mother who ended up being shot by Secret Service going down the wrong way, over and over and over again in front of the White House, who swore for days that she'd heard the voice of Barack Obama telling her to do stuff. I mean, here it is from Wired magazine right here in 2007, the voice of God weapon returns. You know, we've had this technology, we've had these kind of things for decades now. Decades. We have been able to put a voice in somebody's head. We have been able to influence people via distance. The only difference now is the size of the technology, the different combinations of technology that can be used to achieve the same goal that maybe once you had to be in the same room or an adjoining room to somebody to make it happen, you know?
No, and that is the scary thought. And for those of you that are kind of interested in this topic and other topics, you know, I am going to be out in Arizona at Mind Nexus, September 27th, 29th. And I think, as we were talking earlier, I think a lot of the speakers there are kind of some feel-good topics on spirituality. And so unfortunately, you know, I'll be bringing up the dystopian aspect of, you know, some of the speakers there, I imagine, because that's, you know, just the nature of kind of, you know, what I've had to deal with in the research that I've done. But anybody that's interested in this is certainly invited to attend. And on my Facebook page, I'll have the flyer that's out, advertisement for it, and I've sent it to you as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. I've got it up on screen right now. You can find all that information, folks, at cosmicclarityconnections.org/events. Is the page with the full schedule, all that kind of stuff. It seems like a really cool event with tons of great speakers. And once again, I am glad to see you getting back out there to bring this message to people, to let people know that not only are there means of control out there, but there are answers. There are communities. There's help. There's ways to get help. And what do you recommend, especially for if there's somebody out there right now who's listening who may have a friend or family member that has been silently suffering with this, Doctor? What do you recommend for them? We have you for about another 5 minutes or so.
Well, like I said, there's organizations popping up all the time because this is such a common thing now that there are groups, people. You can tell Freedom from Covert Harassment used to be the big one. There's other groups that have kind of come out now that you can find to talk to. I maintain a Facebook page. It's Guinea Pigs that people can go to and certainly message me. I get a ton of messages. I may not reply immediately, but eventually usually do reply. And certainly if they get a hold of me, and they're possibly hearing voices or having tinnitus bad, which is, the step that you typically get with this technology before, they have the ability to put voices in your head or communicate with you. A lot of times I'll get with you and we'll try to create a binaural beat program for them. That seems to synchronize the two hemispheres of the brain, and it's not perfect, but it does help defeat some of the technology because it's operating at a similar frequency and creates a synchronous EEG that makes it harder for them to actually pick up on your EEG or heterodyne your EEG.
Yeah.
And kind of like I said before, every family member has somebody in their, immediate or distant family now that's complaining about this. And the one good thing is I think we're doing our job as far as education wise, because there's one young man that I know you've helped as well. Yeah. And his, not using any names, but his father was a physician or is a physician and reached out to me, physician to physician, doctor to doctor, and wholeheartedly believed his son, and 10 years ago that just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So, usually if I got a call from a parent, it was typically to accuse me of convincing them through my books that they're being targeted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's refreshing to see that, there is somebody that's my age or older that, you can go on Google and look and go, man, this is, there are people with some letters behind their names that are saying this is real.
That's right.
And really got you to thank for most of that, because you picked up the torch on this topic, early on, and have continued to carry it when some of the even syndicated shows that deal with mostly conspiracy theory and stuff have decided that they're going to talk about naturopathy and stuff mostly.
Yeah.
So.
And it's one of those that much like human trafficking, frequently it brings up a wall with people because it's a topic that they aren't comfortable with. It's a topic that they aren't ready to deal with, but it's one that you need to be ready to deal with because much like human trafficking, it's all around us. Once again, it's not just targeting with electrical beams and things like that. There is an attack on our brain and on our mind with the way that we process information, people. And that in and of itself is being trampled and bombarded and bruised and hurt to the point that our hippocampi do not recover properly, which means we do not process information properly, which means you are much more likely to follow a paradigm than a truth. So thank you so much, Doctor, as always, for coming on. I greatly appreciate your time. I highly, highly respect your work and you as a person. So I always appreciate the time you give to us.
Great to be on with you, Chris, anytime.
Well, hold the line real quick while we close things out. Once again, while you are online, everybody, checking out the amazing work of Dr. John Hall, make sure to stop on by and check out CosmicClarityConnections.org. You can find out more about the tickets for the upcoming event there in Tucson, Arizona with Dr. John Hall and so many others. Of course, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can share, comment. It's where you can find all the YouTubes of our guests, as well as CuriousRealm.com/store, where you can get all the books, videos, classes, things like that. If you are looking to put on an event in your area in the world of cryptozoology, paranormal, parapsychological, parapolitical, things like that, stop on by curiousevents.org, everybody. We can help you out. We can help you find vendors, speakers, all kinds of things. Curiousevents.org is what that is all about. And do not forget our all-new free Roku app. If you are a Roku device user, stop on by, download the free Curious Realm app, get all the episodes, as well as tons of free binaural beat music made by yours truly. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in this week. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, period. It is your open hearts, your open minds that make the conversation. And without the conversation, humanity does not move forward. So thank you so much, as always, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. To download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault, or become a sponsor of Curious Realm, visit our website at curiousrealm.com. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast and video services, curiousrealm.com, as well as KGRA Radio, APR TV, and the official Curious Realm app for Roku devices. Curious Realm is a proud member of the Ground Zero Media and Aftermath Media family of podcasts. For more great shows and members-only content, visit aftermath.media today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.